Hi guys, Togre here with a new video. In this video, we're going to talk about SOD and why I am currently not willing to play SOD. There are many reasons. I think people that are PvPers do know what I'm going to talk about. But mainly that the balancing for PvP is really shit. And I think there is no like saving grace behind it. Even if you're going to say, but all classes are kinda able to play in PvP because they have a better kit or whatever. The truth is that it is ridiculous. You just need to step in. For example, the Blood Moon event, you need to step in into a BG where it's a bit more balanced. Although, to be fair, there are like 3 or 4 classes that are stepping on every single class. You would say that in Classic it is a bit the same. I would say it is not. It just is that classes have more defined roles, where in SOD specs are like their own entity. It is not like a class thing, it's more of a spec thing now. And truly, there are like 4 specs stepping on everyone compared to the other specs that are available to the game, the other 27 specs in the game. So I am not really happy about that. I also think like the power creep is crazy. I think if you compare it to like in Classic Anniversary, which again is not the best PvP like expansion ever either. It is fun, but it is unbalanced, and it is, I think, unbalanced for a reason. So everyone is obliged to group up to have the full potential of their class. A flag carrier druid is kind of nothing if you're facing a pre-made and you have no pre-made. It's going to be very difficult to just pass the sea of pre-mades versus you. If you're a warrior and you don't have a healer, well, you're going to stick on roots every single time you're going to touch, or like you have the mischance of facing a mage. If you are a rogue, well, you can do some solo plays, but truly you're going to die afterwards. If you are a mage, you can do some pretty solo things, but again, if you don't have like the other CC or like a frontline, at one point you're going to die to the next best thing. If you're a hunter, obviously you're going to be able to do a lot of good solo plays like a mage, but at the one point you're going to face the inevitable warrior paired with a healer, and you're there like literally trying to do a feign death trap, which is not going to work because there is a dispel. If you're facing a shaman, well, the shamanist can also do like the elemental mastery one shot, which is possible, but again, that's a CD. You're not going to be able to do that every single time, so you will have and need a group around you. I can do that for every single class. But in SOD is a bit different, right? You have a balance route doing Starfall, dancing, and everyone dies. You have a retribution paladin literally like destroying multitude of people in like in a few hits, or a Shockadin which like equally heals well and do damage. You have also obviously the elemental shamans. You have obviously the great elemental shamans have actually. So it's really not fun in SOD. And I think the power creep tied to also like not be able to, I would say, gear up efficiently for PvP, because obviously you need to be Grand Marshal, but it takes weeks to get it. It's not like something you can grind on a weekend, so it's very difficult. So I would say that obviously that is one big part why I'm not playing SOD. But that's not the only thing. As you can see, I'm on Warcraft logs, and you can already tell what I'm going to say. I'm going to move my camera. Warcraft logs. This is like, you can guess which expansion is this for. I'll give you a second, obviously. Just a second. Yeah, this is from Season of Discovery. And that's phase 7, not phase 8. Season of Discovery, Naxxramas, all bosses. You could also do Patchwork, which is even more crazy because Patchwork is a boss, obviously, where DPS is everything. You have fire mages literally going upwards 27,500 DPS, which is every second you do 27,500 damage. That's how DPS works, and that's every single second. You have obviously some peaks, and you have some lows, and that's why you have, like, for example, the max is 36,700. This is insane amount of damage. I think you could realize if you play other versions of the game. This is literally power creep at their finest. They do the same in retail, where you have now moral strikes upwards to 3 million, 4 million, with HP pools of 10 million, which is again meaningless. It is again going into the Diablo path of exile, like hack and slash way, where you want bigger and better numbers every single time. At one point, when do we say stop? If you are going to look at the DPS that is going to be also from phase 8, you may maybe say, look, it's patchwork, maybe it's a gimmick. Well, you could say other like bosses as well. It's still around that number. If you're going to Gluth, the same, around that number. If you go to Thaddeus, it is still around that number, even higher. If you go to Noth the Plague Bringer, the same. And that's also for the lowest of lowest. You have Garden Druid, which are the bear form druids. They're tanks. They're doing around 6k DPS. And you're going to say to me that this is okay. That's fine. Now let me show you some logs from what I did in Wrath of the Lich King. Well, this is my guild from Wrath of the Lich King, Earthshaker. We were nowhere near the biggest bosses, that's for sure. But this is a rank 90 boss from Orphid, which is a arms warrior. I'm going to show it like this. And that's on patchwork. So you see, patchwork, can I show you? I think, yeah, it's patchwork, 25 player. You scroll down and you see Orphid doing 5.5k DPS on that boss. Then you have, obviously, for example, Survival Hunter, 7.2k DPS. And you see that you can say whatever you want. You can maybe say, oh, they have ads, that's why it's like padded, or yeah, like there's a mechanic where you have padded numbers, and that is true. But even in single target, if you are counting only single target damage, you are going to have crazy amount of damage. Damage to bosses, for example, here you have damage to bosses, patchwork. It is still around 27,500. So it's not the ads the problem. The problem is the power creep. It is, for me, impossible to think that in a vanilla setting, in a classic minus plus setting, which is Season of Discovery, you actually deal more damage and DPS than in Wrath of the Lich King. And you might say, but it is because of the world bosses, it's world buffs, it's because of the consumes, it's because of the multitude of new things, which is true. But that's why I am just not like, I'm not disgusted by Season of Discovery, but like disappointed that they feel like that's a correct way to do Classic Plus. And that's why I'm actually very worried. I'm worried about like Classic Plus and how they see Classic Plus. Do they understand that power creep is something very, very drastic? Once you have like, once you go that path, it's very hard to backpedal to a normalization of the numbers. And that's why, for example, for someone that has 10k HP, dealing 27k DPS is not okay in my books. That's why it's realistic that in Classic, whenever you're facing bosses, and realistic, that's for the best passing guilds, obviously, that if you're like hitting, for example, Nefarian, or if you're hitting Chromagus, or if you're hitting like any other boss, like for example Pharma, that you're not going to do 2k DPS when you have 6k health. That's not healthy, and that's why you need so many modifiers in PvP as well. Because again, they put so much damage on their abilities, on the runes, on the gear, that they have to put like crazy modifiers that the class doesn't play the same in PvP as in PvE. And that's, for me, like, is already a no-no. So that's one example I wanted to give, and to make you understand, because I could also say like, oh, SOD has cataclysm levels of DPS, and I think I'm like super mild about it, because this is really not the case. Like I think for cataclysm the DPS is not as high as in Nextramas right now, and I would say in phase 8, even though it's already like simulation with like simulation craft, that they're like going to go towards 9k DPS. Even whenever you are going to divide the number by 3 for some obscure reason, it's still more than Wrath of the Lich King phase 1. So there is my question. Why are they thinking that's a good idea to actually go that path? I personally don't feel like it's a good option. So they need to realize that problem. Until they fix that, I think I am not going to really commit for SOD for sure, because it's probably the last phase as well. And I think I'm going to wait out for Classic Plus, but they need like a lot of stuff for Classic Plus to be super good. I think, if I on top of my head, PvP should be somewhat of a rated option. So if I think RBGs would be a very good start, like a solo queue RPG kind of thing. But the thing is, like, you have a lot of ways to queue up and sync queues with people, so it would be abused. So I think a pre-made 10v10 would be the best and sweet spot for those occasions. I think also adding new BGs, for example, Eye of the Storm, for example, like the BGs that were not made by Blizzard, but they were planning to make, for example, arenas, that would be also an option. I think there are like a lot of things that they can do towards PvP without touching too much the power level. I think, yes, you can give a bit more power towards those meme classes, but that can be helped by, for example, making trinkets being 2 minutes. That would be already very big for some classes. I think also mana is an issue for a lot of classes. For example, Shadow Priest, it's not a meme class, it's very good, but in PvP you get very quickly with that class, compared to like Frost Mages, Warlocks, that can of course life tap, and like other like classes that have no mana. For example, Boomies as well, like they have to hard cast Rafts and Starfires, which is very difficult in a world where hard casting is not ideal. Like even Frost Mages, when they are like multiple people around them, they're not really casting Frost Bolts, they're like doing Cone of Coals, Arcane Explosions, maybe a fire blast, or like Fire Blast obviously, but also the Fire Wave, a blast wave, excuse me, and like multitude of things. For example, also resetting the Cone of Cold and doing it again, for example. Like a lot of classes are like relying on like instant casts, while for example Bounce Druid, they cannot rely on the dots, because the dots are really bad already, but also they deal no damage and they have high mana costs, and obviously you have Starfire and Wrath being not really worth it, except if you do a big crit, but for that you need to really cast and be like forgotten by the people. And that's like a lot of things. For example, Retribution Paladin being like a snail, and like being kited to death. Warriors not being able to charge in combat. If they could charge in combat, that would be already changing the dynamic towards Frost Mage versus Warrior kind of gameplay. Or like having spell shield, or like a spell reflect would also do a lot of stuff, for example. Like those kind of things would make PvP already very dynamic. I would also say like some sort of a mortal strike effect, a lot easier to access for rogues and for hunters. Like I introduced the aim shot mortal strike effect that you have in TBC, do that as well in Classic. Like a lot of those stuff can be done without breaking the game to the point where we have it today with Season of Discovery. And then you have obviously, like, if you're not a PvPer, the PvE side of things. I think instead of like putting new tiers of gears, like improvement on tier of gears, also like doing crazy sets in general and crazy amount of wall buffs, I think if you just keep how Classic is and you add just the help that needs to be given to the meme classes, a bit more scaling towards the attacks that has no scaling. For example, why is Warrior so good? Because Bloodthirst scales with AP, which is super easy to get, super easy to access, and that's the thing that really just makes them like scale into infinite. While, for example, a Rogue, it's really limited. A Druid, like their Rake and Rip, does nothing. Their Shred is also limited to their paw damage and not to their weapon damage. So they are already very much of a worst arms warrior comes a point, for example. Arms warrior, the same. More strike doesn't have an AP component, so obviously they cannot really scale well until like they scale well until they have like a weapon that doesn't really get an upgrade. So at that one point, Bloodthirst is just way better because it has like infinite scaling, while the weapon doesn't scale infinitely. You have many things like, for example, hunters as well. They don't really have scaling as well, like on their abilities. They don't have scaling. They have like weapon scaling, but like I said, weapon scaling has a stop, while AP never has a stop. Like at one point, you can have even more AP, even more AP, and even more AP, and that is why it scales so well, come through the phases. And that's why wall buffs really does a lot. And that's the same for every single class. So there are a few things that they can just add that will not break the game, but it would maybe add more DPS towards the lower end to maybe join the higher end. And that is the goal. Putting new tier sets is great. Have a tier set for Retribution Paladin, great. But it should be on the same level as the tier sets that are already in the game. It should not be literally made like a retail or a Cataclysm or a Mist of Pandaria tier set, because then you will have ridiculous scaling on all those things that are going to then give those results. So that's my opinion again for a Classic Plus. It doesn't need to go with better gear, crazy TSS, crazy bonuses, crazy everything. Just keep it simple, add more abilities, obviously, to the classes, give more flavor, but don't go overboard to the point where you have like instant lava bursts, for example, in a game where instants are really limited. It should be limited. You don't really get a instant frostbolt except if you're doing presence of mind, for example. You should not be like doing instants every single time like you are in retail. That's just not the gameplay that I am looking for Classic. So that's why Season of Discovery is way beyond Classic, in my opinion. I think a lot of people agree with that. I understand that some people have fun with SOD, but I am really sick of seeing big numbers. I think retail already made me sick for that. That's why I'm not really playing these days on retail, because again, I don't want to do 3 million moral strikes. I want to have like a readable number. Like I don't want to have like 9 zeros, 8 zeros, 7 zeros, 6 zeros behind the one thing I'm going to do, because again, it's only season 2 for retail. How is it going to be in season 3? It's going to be times 2. If it's going to be faced like season 4 as well for the World Within, it's going to be times 3. And then you have obviously Midnight, which is the next expansion. Or what are they going to do? They're going to do a number squish and then ruin the whole open world again. They're going to do that because they have no choice, but because they cannot really put a stop to their scaling. They need to understand, like at one point, the verticality should not be that steep. It should be a bit less. Gameplay should not rely on the amount of damage you can actually do, but more about how you deal those damages that you're going to do. But that's my take. Again, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.